Welcome everyone to Mechanics Institute. I'm Laura Shepard, Director of Events. We're very pleased to welcome you to our program, The Future of Libraries, Opening the Doors for Democracy. Tonight, we're very honored and pleased to present this program in conjunction with the annual Architecture and the City Festival presented by AIA-SF and the Center for Architecture and Design. If you're new to Mechanics Institute, we were founded in 1854 and we're one of San Francisco's most vital literary and cultural centers in the heart of the city. We feature our general interest library on the second and third floors, our international chess club down the hallway, ongoing author and literary programs, and cinema-lit film series on Friday nights. So please visit us at milibrary.org. Also, after our program, if you are new and would like a tour of our library, please see our staff. Alyssa Stone, our Senior Director of Programming and Community Outreach, will lead you on a lovely tour to the other floors of our building. Also, after our program, we'll have a Q&A with you, our audience. But first, I'd like to introduce Charles Higueras, who's the Chair of the Board of Directors of the Center for Architecture and Design.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. I know you're all library lovers, so I'll just take that as a basic assumption in my remarks today. As you know, the center, maybe you don't know, but I hope you do. The Center for Architecture and Design was inaugurated on Friday of last week. It really is an amazing place. Show of hands, how many folks have had the opportunity to get out there? Right? Wonderful, right? It's an amazing venue. The catalyst for the CAD, as we call it shorthand, was the first Architecture in the City Festival that was launched in 2004. That program was administered by the AIA-SF for a number of years until the CAD was formed. The CAD is a 501c3 organization. It is a separate organization from the AIA-SF. AIA-SF, of course, is oriented to serving the Professional Society of Design Professionals Architects. And the CAD is intended to be certainly inclusive of architects, but of all other design and affiliated professions. And as importantly, it seeks to engage with the larger and diverse community of this city, and the Bay Area, frankly, for that matter. And so for the longest time, we were somewhat hampered by the lack of a good venue to sponsor events, programs, and speakers. But with this center, it's a game changer. We now have a venue where we can engage much more fully, much more authentically with the diversity of this community of ours here in San Francisco and beyond. We will be able to genuinely embrace the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion that we so much wish to see realized in all the work that we as design professionals do in favor of a built environment. So with that said, I invite all of you to look for exciting new programs, events, and speakers scheduled to appear at the CAD. You're more than welcome. We'd love to have you there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles. And if you have not been over there, the festival is continuing. Architecture in the City Festival continues through the month. And the building, their new site is so gorgeous. So I recommend you walk over there. They've got a beautiful cafe, great coffee. Take a tour of the building. It's spectacular. I'm going to also give the rest of the introductions for our program tonight. Before I begin, of course, tonight our program is hosted by John King, who is the San Francisco Chronicle's urban design critic, and a lifelong fan of libraries. His prior publication includes Cityscapes, San Francisco and its Buildings, and his upcoming publication, coming out in November, is Portal, San Francisco's Ferry Building and the Reinvention of American Cities. John will be here on November 16th for an author event, so we hope you'll come back for that program. Now, from Noll and Tam, I'd like to also introduce Christopher Noll, who's a principal of Noll and Tam and the firm's library practice leader. He has directed all of Noll and Tam's public library projects since the firm's founding. He is also involved in the library community through the California Library Association and also the American Library Association, California Library Association and the American Library Association. And also as a member of the California Library Association, he led a statewide space needs assessment for California's more than 1,100 public libraries. Thank you. Also from Noll and Tam, we have Trina Goodwin, has planned and designed numerous Bay Area public facilities at Noll and Tam since 2005, and she's an associate principal with the firm. Tina most recently designed the interior architecture for the Hayward Library and Community Learning Center, which won an award in the last year. She offers the dual perspective of an architect and an interior designer, specializing in space planning and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And also I should make note that Noll and Tam did a redesign, a refresh and redesign for the Mechanics Institute Library, which they proposed several years ago, and we're going to see a few images from that wonderful design. Our other firm that's represented tonight is WRNS, and from that firm we have Pauline Souza. She has dedicated her career to the building and advocacy of high-quality, sustainable environments that serve the public, students, and educators. A recognized leader within the green building movement, Pauline's work has advanced sustainable thinking by stewarding thoughtful principles into firm-wide practices. And with her, Adam Woltag. Approaches each design challenge by searching for a balance between the poetic and the pragmatic. Beauty meets budget, program, and site. The places he crafts respond to the natural environment and function sustainability with a lasting elegance that does more with less. Good lesson for today. And once again, Charles Higueras, recently retired as acting director of the project management of San Francisco's Department of Public Works. Mr. Higueras served as the San Francisco Public Library Commissioner from 1996 to 2008, providing oversight of the Branch Library Improvement Program of 2000. He is a past board member of the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library and also served on the board of the Urban Libraries Council. And we welcome our esteemed guests. So first, to introduce our program, John King.
And I will keep my part short since there's a crowd of presenters as well as a crowd to listen, so we'll move quick. Yesterday I was out in Mountain House, which is a planned community just over the Altamont Pass. About 27,000 people live there, and it has been in the works. The first construction was 20 years ago. It was approved a decade before that. And in driving around and looking at what's been done, I went to the Civic Center on Main Street, appropriately. They planned this from the start. And there is a pairing of civic buildings there. I mean, this is very much a place in flux and lots of big empty lots still and all. But the Civic Center had a town hall connected to the public library, single structure. And I was struck going inside. First, I love the idea that a community like this, that's very much literally a 21st century city with so many other things missing you'd expect, and then amenities piled on that are kind of speaking to a culture that's geared more to present-day suburbia, that it did see the importance of having a library as an opening statement of the importance of this is what we see as a civic place. And then I was also struck going in a few things. One is it was very spacious, and the children's section was as large as the adult section, common area, DVDs, everything else. And it just allowed you to start reading the community priorities, the community demographics, and so on. Then also there was an area that had books in different languages. And it had, it's Central Valley, as you can expect, there were the shelves for Spanish-speaking residents or patrons. But then also a stack of shelves in Hindi, Punjab, and Urdu, because the main population of Mountain House, the single largest population group, is Southeast Asian at this point. And it was just kind of fun with this meeting coming up to kind of see how libraries, the future of libraries is so tied to the past of libraries, because any of us who grew up with a library they went to as a kid and things, or as a library they've used as an adult, you have all the associations, all the expectations in your mind. But they're also a way of defining a community and defining the message the community wants to project about itself. And it's a time when libraries ideally are, with mom and apple pie and baseball in terms of civic goods. As I was walking over, I was talking to a photo editor at the Chronicle, and I just mentioned to her what I was doing tonight. She said, "Oh, libraries are my ideal place. I wish I was a librarian." But obviously, sadly, if you read news, you read about the book banning, you read about the horrible attacks on librarians, so far just rhetorical. So they become a tug of war within the larger, very sad cultural strains within the United States. So having people talk about designing libraries, as we have from these two very good firms, is not just how do you decide how tall the shelf is, and do you go for Greek columns or neoclassical columns, but it is about how do you design something that is kind of timelessly designed and it's totally of the moment. So what I will do now is hand off to Noll and Tam first. They will present in a brisk 10 minutes the slideshow, and then WRNS will follow up with a brisk 10-minute slideshow, because they know the importance of getting to the conversation and then to your questions. So I'll just hand it off right now. And thank you all for being here.
So I'd like to start out by introducing, Noll and Tam briefly. We are a 40-person firm in Berkeley, and I gotta hold the microphone just this way. And we've been designing a lot of libraries over the years, and we really love libraries. You can see a few of them that we've done here, and what's most wonderful about libraries is that everyone is totally different. Everyone is a unique challenge. Everyone brings a special kind of joy to our hearts, and it's something that Trina and I have devoted our careers to. We are working currently with the Mechanics Institute, and hopefully one of these days we will start working on reorganizing the second and third floors with new sort of furniture and finishes. These are some renderings of what it might look like in the future, if we can put a little bit of paint, a little bit of this, and a little bit of that. It really does. It has been here for a long time, and it really needs some TLC. And we're really looking forward to bringing in some modern library standards into this building. I'm going to start out by talking about the Hayward Library. It's one of our recent ones. It just won a CC AIA award, and it is a sort of an amazing library for the community of Hayward. It's a large city of about 180,000 people. It had a decrepit old library in the middle of the park. We proposed moving it out of the park onto an urban site so that then the park itself could be restored into a community resource. And so the park and the library together, form this kind of one thing. It is the library park. It was conceived on 3 floors because it was a tight site. The ground floor are fundamentals. It's a children's area. It's noisy. It's loud. There's a marketplace in there. The second floor is about inquiry and exploration, and it's where the teen center, the computers and technology, and all the public meeting spaces. And the third floor was conceived of as a quiet space for reading and reflection with an outdoor. And it's all held together by this atrium in the middle. And people would criticize us for, why are you giving up all this space, empty space? And it really has many different functions about what it might do. But it brings in natural light, and it really helps us in our sustainability goals, but it's also about orientation and visibility, and it really helps the management of the library by having that open space in the center. This sort of shows the relationship of the library facing the park, and this is a section showing some of the sustainability features. It is a net zero energy library. It generates more electricity than it uses. We also have a very innovative water collection and reuse system where all the toilets are being flushed with reused water, as well as some irrigation in this great system where we used the old basement of the library in the middle of the park and we made it into a cistern. So we're very kind of proud to have this innovative water system. We'll take you for a little tour through the library. This is the front door there from the corner of Mission and C Street. You walk into this sort of really amazing tall library, a lobby space with the atrium and this wonderful stairway that kind of very sculptural and winds up there. It has a library friends bookstore and marketplace in there. And it sort of shows the atrium having sort of this visibility through the library. One of the things about this was that the library quadrupled in size from the original, but they weren't getting any additional staff. And so this was a way of making it really visible and transparent. So wherever you are in the library, it's easy to find your way around. The service desks are all lined up on 3 floors, one above the other. It's really kind of, the organization of it is such that it makes it easy to use. Spaces for adults and spaces for computers and teen space beyond that. Third floor is where the more quiet reading spaces are. Most of the collections, an outdoor reading garden over there in the corner. Oopsie. Looking, wonderful views looking up and down. The children's area we're especially proud of. It's sort of very large and full of vibrant and activity and lots of children of sort of younger ages and sort of storybook time, tweens, places for tweens to get away from the younger kids, places for early childhood learning, and a nice story time room, which kind of resembles kind of the inside of a geode. But it's very popular with looking out onto the park. The teen space is quite extensive. It has room for kids to hang out and study, and also to socialize, and has a homework center at the back with these wonderful little cave alcoves. And then this is a community learning center, and the Hayward community took this very much to heart. So we have lots of public meeting spaces. This is the large community meeting room that overhangs the street. We have medium-sized meeting rooms, technology rooms, a media space. This is digital media studios. There's an audio studio and a video studio at either end of this room, and this is the place to work on them, and a maker space. So it is kind of very closely connected to the park. You can see its relationship to that, and it really kind of is really tied in. And with that, I'll turn it over to Trina to talk about the Half Moon Bay Library.
All right, well, thank you very much, Chris. Half Moon Bay also was an award-winning library. We won a National AIA Award, AIA Award. And it is opening day that we see here, and it was a joyous occasion, but it didn't really start out that way, and as John alludes to, we have these conflicts in our society and they play out when we do these projects. So because it's hard to read, I'll read this quote. Ensuring that the community feels represented is important for the success of the project. Activities that allow the public feedback can develop a sense of trust in the project team, as well as community ownership of the projects overall. This was a quote from our branch librarian after a pretty controversial process we went through. There were people who were concerned that the building was too big for their town. They felt like the city was not spending public dollars wisely, And so they were fighting to make the library smaller, which is not what first comes to mind when you hear, oh, everybody's going to be so happy. So one of the things that we did was we broke the building in two, and we made the smaller volume, which is the public meeting space, face out to the single-family residences across the street. So it really broke the volume down of the building. And we set the taller part further back, and it's adjacent to the junior high school, which has a little larger scale to it. We also created a series of outdoor spaces. So there's sort of a plaza in front. There is a courtyard between the two volumes, and there's a children's garden in the back. So we were kind of embedded it into the landscape more. The layout of this building has the children's area on the first floor and the little number 4 on the right. This is the meeting space that has the courtyard in between, and then upstairs has most of the adult spaces. And it also had reached high sustainability awards goals, including LEED Platinum, and it's also net zero. So as you come in the front door, it's kind of self-serve. There is a little service point around the corner, but it's mainly children's. And you can see that little circle we'll look through in a moment. Most adults go upstairs, and you would have gone to the left to go into the meeting room. So the children can come through their own special little door, or we have the main entry by the stairs. And it, again, has several different zones for different ages of children. And we were playing off the theme of beach and boardwalk and bubbles in the water. That's sort of where the circles came from. And they have this children's garden in back where they have a lot of programs. They do a lot of wildly, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Ambitious programming. So for example, during summer when school's out, they have a lot of children who depend on schools for lunch. The library serves lunch during summer. So they have a lot of different types of programs here. This is the courtyard between the two buildings. And the meeting room. So the meeting room was one of the things that we cut in half. They didn't have as many as they wanted. So we made this so that it could expand outside as a secondary space, and it also has a divider. And this folding roof is really to kind of hide that, that ugly divider you get sometimes in a space where you're putting a divider in. Upstairs, it's a big open area with views in all directions, and it's sort of surrounded by small glassed-in spaces. We use a lot of glass so libraries can see into different spaces and feel safe. The library's kind of inside out. It's noisy. And so this is the quiet room. If you want quiet, you can go someplace, but it's not the main part of the library. The teen room, the makerspace, you can see they have all kinds of programs going there. And then it's really about these different moments, whether it's kids playing outside, the kids working quietly in the quiet room, or views back in through the building. And at the end of the day, it was a library people love. And so it is about listening to the community, reflecting their needs, and bringing it forward. So with that, I'll pass it on to WRNS.
Thank you. I'm really excited to kind of share with you the story of the Atherton Library. And really, it's hard not to talk about this library without talking about its context. And it's not a standalone library. The Atherton Library is actually part of a much larger project we were the architects for, which was the Civic Center, a brand new Civic Center, remodeling of their Civic Center in Atherton, California. So we had the wonderful ability as architects to kind of reshape our whole world, and this library was a part of that conversation. So Atherton, as you know, is a relatively small town. About 5 square miles, there's about 7,000 residents. And one of the nice things about this place is that 20% of the population is under 18 and 20% of the population is over 65, which is 100% of the folks that come to this library are constituents that we were looking at. But when we got to the site, it looked something like this. It was kind of a hodgepodge of different buildings. This was the Atherton Civic Center. Always nice to design a library next to an active train track, which you see along the top. Lots of hardscape parking. But the wonderful things about this site is that it was in a neighborhood, directly connected to a residential neighborhood. And half the site was occupied by absolutely beautiful heritage oak trees. So we had something to really get excited about. The town wanted to have a civic center that was all pedestrian. So our design for the civic center was really to group the town hall, city hall, the police station into one building. And then on the opposite side of the civic center to have a library adjacent to in a historic town hall here. Reroute roads around a very connected civic space. This is an aerial view of that. You can start to see really one of the wonderful things about this new civic space that connects the town hall to the library is actually finally for the first time getting these oak trees to be a part of the experience of the civic center. They became kind of characters in this play. And it was wonderful to be able to try to amplify those for the residents. So it's a small library. It's a one-story library, just about 11,000 square feet. And this, all full disclosure, is my favorite elevation of the building. It fit the elevation that faces the train tracks. It's a rammed earth wall that faces the streets. And one of that, with a few openings in it, 2 openings that are about framing these beautiful oak trees that really are about being an Atherton and being in this part of the site. The material palette we looked at for the library, and again, it really kind of grew out of wanting to be connected to landscape in the site and responding to the oak trees. But it also had a civic presence. And these rammed earth walls that you see here were doing double duty for us. They had acoustic properties. We thought they were beautiful, and they fed into a desire for a very natural material palette that was going to really feel connected to place. And at the end of the day, they kind of had a civic nature to them. They were elemental, and we liked, to John's point earlier, we didn't have to put columns everywhere to kind of to express what a library should look like. This building kind of did it on its own in its very humble material palette. We had a historic resource here, a 100-year-old building, the Old Town Hall. And the new Atherton Library steps back from that building, respecting the history of this site, and engages the Old Town Hall next to a spectacular oak tree with a large open wood deck. I love this photograph because when you start to think about civic architecture over time, and you look at this beautiful Spanish Mediterranean civic expression, and then you look at a modern civic expression next to one another, they just felt like a wonderful grouping of buildings. One leaning forward, obviously. It's a beautiful open space that they use for many different types of activities. Now, the plan of the building, I hate to say this as a designer, but it almost designed itself. We had to fit this library, not cut down any trees. We had to fit it in respect to the existing town hall. So the building really wedged into this site just perfectly. As you can see in the plan, the idea was one large open volume defined by a single bookshelf that rolled the whole 190 feet through that space. All the collections are open and connected to one another, and there's one quiet space in the back where the adults like to hang out, and a very large open space off the deck where the children like to hang out. Opposite the bookshelf is where you have all the back of house for the librarians, restrooms, and then maker spaces and mechanical spaces. This is the view looking through the library from the children's area toward the back. Wayfinding is really defined by skylights. The furniture is low, and working with this librarian, the idea of their delivery model was that they wanted this to feel more retail than more traditional. There's no circulation desk. And the idea is that when people come to this library, they want their staff to get up and greet them, and engage with them. So it's a very open and light-filled environment. Outdoor spaces were huge. With a 10,000 square foot library and you want to pack a lot of punch, we have over 4,000 square feet of outdoor spaces that help kind of amplify a more cost-saving approach for the library to have their programs spilled outside. Over to Pauline Souza.
Thank you. I'm gonna layer in, you're gonna see some of the same photos, but I'm gonna layer in a little bit of a detail in those spaces. And I'll say that this struck us because it wasn't how, at least for me, it wasn't how I thought of libraries when I was growing up. Libraries were where I went after school while I waited for my parents to pick me up or my mom to pick me up. But now it is, as John was saying, it's a very different place. So how can a library help support this education or help support this community. And really, we talked not about democracy with our client, but we talked about transparency, we talked about equity, we talked about agency. We talked about how everything needed to do a lot more good and not just about providing a place for answers, but a place to ask questions. So I'm going to share a little bit about how we hope it's evident in our site, in our systems, in our details. As Adam showed, this is really about a place within the trees, and we learned that it was really those trees were really an extension of a habitat corridor. And so that provided insight into how we should think about the whole site and how could we explain that to the residents. So sorry, a lot of text here, a lot of information, but really supporting that it taught us that landscape needed to be more than just something to work around in terms of plan. This Atherton has an inadequate stormwater system. Everything floods. You wonder why, because they seem to have enough money. But anyway, there's so how could what we were doing there provide insight to the community, to the residents about caring for the limited water system they have, or the water, the city infrastructure that you can't. So we have pervious paving, we have lots of retention basins which are required. We have landscape that really reflects limited water need. This campus is also all electric. That was groundbreaking, honestly, at that time. It is a reduction in carbon, and as we know, that's what is contributing to global warming. It's also net zero energy, and we talked about this as part of a microgrid. And that microgrid is a response to resiliency, and as we're all experiencing, the wildfires and other issues with our utility company. So this whole site was about educating and providing a little more education for its residents. So I can show, there's same image, but there's pervious paving and some bioswales. And then it gets to this quote, which is what helped us. Again, when we were looking at doing, when we did some other libraries before, it was about how quiet can this place be? How can we organize the stacks and what they had? And here our client said, it really is not about closing in the quiet. It's about shutting out the noise. How can you live together in this one space? So there's no circulation desk. It's really about giving agency to patrons to come and find what you need. Adam shared this diagram of the wall of books that hopefully draws you in. It's all one place. It's not really organized into here's where you go and here's where you go. And then there's a lot of transparency and visibility, and the daylighting from the skylight. If I can press this right. Oops. And there's a really a connection to a biophilic approach, so the connection to nature. It's a place for all ages, as you can see. Sure, there's a Willie Mays meeting room. That's pretty awesome. But it is also a place where you can go through and be a part of everything. So approximately 80% of all these spaces receive good daylighting. That means they don't depend on their artificial lighting, which means their bills are small. There's about 95% of the library interiors have a direct line of sight. So that is great in terms of to the outdoors, which is a great place to be able to see what's going on, to be a part of different activities. It also supports security and the idea of being in a place where you can understand where your kids are or where your parents are. And you can see through to the makerspace beyond. And again, 40% of the lighting is reduced in wattage. That again is a smart thing to do because we take advantage of all the good daylighting. I hope this is okay. Their energy use intensity is at 26. For those who don't know if that means it's good or bad, that's good. And part of that is because not only of the contribution of good daylighting, but because there's a mechanical system under the ground, under the floor, which provides air, and which is a very efficient way of providing air, and it's a very comfortable way of providing air. It's called displacement ventilation. Okay, this is my favorite slide, and Adam hates it, but I'll tell you why it's good. This says that it's 70% better than a normal library of this type. So that big kind of light blue circle is what a normal one would be, and that little light blue circle is what this is. And all of this just says we're trying to do better. And all of this information is available on the monitors to hopefully inspire folks to learn a little bit more about energy or carbon or water or health. I mean, honestly, all of this is about supporting a healthier environment. It's not just about less wattage or lower bills. And just a diagram of how everything should do good service. We looked at materials, maybe very quickly. The idea of building from local resources, something about a regional connection is important to say. There are great people and craftsmen in this area. So this is Heath tiles. And we could only afford so much, so it's right between the bathrooms. But what we could afford, if you can see on the left-hand side, are these little trays that the tiles are put on when they go into the kiln. And those trays are almost free. So it's kind of fun to have the expensive stuff on the outside, but the more interesting stuff on the inside in the makerspace. So how do you kind of bring stories together through materials? The round earth that Adam talked about, preserving a great element of memory for the town. Again, the carbon side, sorry, I'm a geek on this stuff. It's 26.5, which means pretty good. And there's a way to show what that means. So we look at our carbon with all the materials that we use, and we try to understand how to shrink it and how to track it. Sorry, you can't see the graphic, but this is how much it was supposed to be. This was telling you that the materials we picked in the rammed earth and using the existing town hall made a significant difference. This says that in construction, some things happen that kind of made our footprint go bigger. So it's a way of us tracking what we're doing and trying to bring that into our next project. So that's where we live. It's pretty good. It could be better. We have we've been fortunate to also win a couple of awards. I'd say our greatest definition for success is when folks use this library. It's filled every day. There's kids that walk around, there's elders that walk around, and every aspect is used. So thank you for that time.
And now, something completely different. You know, when I was invited to join this panel, I said, you know, I haven't been in practice for a number of years, so I don't have a project to show. They said, well, you've been in the library biz for a while. Why don't you talk about libraries as context for design for architecture, library systems? So I said, well, that's something I can speak to. Now, what I've done is I've scripted myself in order to be brisk. So I will be reading my remarks here. So, beginning. You saw this already. All right, here we go. So, in 1996, that's right, I was appointed to the Library Commission and served for the 12 years that was mentioned earlier. During my tenure, I had really the great joy to be able to be involved with the evolution and the delivery of the Branch Library Improvement Program, BLIP for short. I was additionally fortunate, frankly, to have been involved in this enterprise with just some really awesome fellow library commissioners with whom charting the path and the progress of this program was a joy. It was easy even, because we all were in consensus most all the time. The case to improve our libraries had been brewing for many years. Those of you who have lived in the city for a while know that the libraries we know and love today weren't always the same libraries from a while ago. The libraries were allowed to fall into some disrepair, in fact, and it was from years of underinvestment in sustaining the library at its best level. The inauguration of the new main library, though, in 1996 was a major catalyst for arousing the sentiment, the interest from the community to see branch libraries also addressed in a very favorable way. Let's skip over something. We were underpinned by that considerable public support and fortunate to have advanced this general obligation bond offered to the voters in 2000. And we were really fortunate to have earned the support of then Mayor Brown. For those of you who've been around the city again for a number of years, if Mayor Brown was for something, it generally happened. And conversely, if he was against it, it did not happen. But he was very much in favor of seeing that the libraries, branch library network, rose up to the level that was evidenced by the new main library. 24 projects were undertaken, and this slide shows the array of projects that we undertook. We did also acquire a new distribution hub, 199th Street, for those of you who know the vicinity. In undertaking the program that we had, we knew that we had to address long neglected deferred maintenance, but we also wanted to bring each branch into alignment with the realities of library service in the 21st century. While we were blessed to have an impressive array of Carnegie, WPA, and mid-century modern libraries, they reflected the eras in which they were built. To accomplish the best modernization of these facilities, we knew we had to select the best design talent available to us. So, in addition to relying on our own Public Works Bureau of Architecture staff, we went to RFQ to find the talent that we eventually selected. And these are the folks you can see here. You probably recognize a number of these, and certainly recognize at least one of the names. The outcome was amazing, was fabulous. I think you all hopefully have visited more than one or two branch libraries here in the city, and you'll find that the quality, the care that was taken to design these branches to align, with best practices of the time. I'm going back now, probably almost 20 years now. It's kind of interesting to say that. I'll talk a little bit about what the future holds for the branch library system in a bit. Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep holding this mic down. Of course, we won Design Excellence Awards throughout. This is just a smattering, if you will, of some of the awards that were received by the projects. I'd like to shift my remarks at this point to the larger context in which public libraries exist, as defined by their users, but as well by the government policies that influence and affect libraries. San Francisco is not alone, obviously, in having a very robust and passionate community of library users. Every branch has its aficionados and its diehard supporters. This has been especially true since 1961, when the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library was founded to overcome the neglect created by that underinvestment I discussed a short while ago. The next 30 years, frankly, was a tale of wins and losses to sustain its existence. Without the advocacy, though, from the grassroots, from the people of the city, we would not be at this moment in time with the success that we have experienced. What is also true is that to earn the support among those in government, you must show tangible benefits to the investment. Some of you may find that diligence from government hard to believe, But it is true, especially for city services, misperceived or otherwise thought expendable. I recall speaking to one elected official around 1999 at a function who told me that libraries were becoming obsolete and would soon be replaced by Amazon and Google. As he was a few drinks into the evening, I smiled and I suggested that we meet another time to further explore this opinion that he had. I didn't reach out to him, he didn't reach out to me, so we never quite resolved his opinion. The economic benefits study performed in 2015, and you see the cover of the report here, shows why the library is an essential investment for any city, any place, frankly. The report is online if you want to check it out. I think it really is, frankly, an awesome report that delineates not just the appraisal of the BLIP program, but explores all of that which made the BLIP program so successful for any number of reasons. So anyone interested in better understanding how libraries function, it's certainly in an urban place, should check out that report. Okay, so just for a moment here, there were 4 categories that were explored by the report, and I'm not going to delve into them because the actual report obviously does greater justice to explaining them. But they were serving San Francisco in the 21st century, catalyzing neighborhood vitality, preserving resources and history, and stimulating economic activity. Now, as you look at this chart, you can see that there were some considerable improvements in the way in which we created a better library and how folks responded to it. And there's no disputing in this particular examination, there's many more data points, of course, that the investment was well worth the effort because the way in which the community responded to it was exceptional. The library is often the community center or living room of a neighborhood. It's where people of all ages go to certainly find books, programs, and services, and as importantly, find each other. It's a safe place that responds especially well to the diversity of our community. There is no other civic place that offers as much to as many people for as many hours in the week as our free and public library. Preserving resources and history, it's said that the most sustainably delivered building is improving the one already built. That's true, and especially relevant in San Francisco because it's also true that seeking to demolish an historic building is next to impossible, and that's probably a good thing. The BLIP was a celebration and demonstration of the historic structures in our portfolio that could be brought into the modern area through really excellent library design. Stimulating economic activity. Apart from the opportunities for local residents and business to participate in the design and construction of a library, having a place honored by the community that contributes to the vibrancy of a neighborhood by enlivening the neighborhood experiences and encouraging other investment in neighborhood improvements cannot be underestimated. And certainly we've seen that throughout most of the branch projects that we undertook in BLIP. For every dollar invested, I think you may recall this on the slide I showed earlier, in BLIP, San Francisco realized a return of between $5 and $9 for every dollar spent. This is the bottom line for those who count the beans. But what's most significant as regards ROI is the amazing surge in library use resulting from both the new and improved facilities and the commitment in serving the unique needs among all the branches. What this has meant to each neighborhood in San Francisco is deep and lasting. In the San Francisco Government Services Ratings, it's a poll, from 2015 to 2023, the SFPL, San Francisco Public Library, outranked every single department in resident satisfaction. And that's especially impressive when you understand that the COVID years, the library was operating just barely at the outset and then on a really bare bones basis thereafter, because most of the library staff, the librarians, were deployed to assist in COVID relief throughout the city. That was another unsung heroic moment for our library. So, what's new, what's next? Last year in November, 80% of the voters approved the continuation of the Library Preservation Fund. And for those of you who don't know, that is the principal source of fund that underwrites the support for our library system here in San Francisco. And it was exceptional in that it advanced or secured certain funding for the next 25 years. This is an applause. That will mean, no doubt, that this library system of ours will continue not certainly to be celebrated by the users and all those who partake of it, but for the next generation effectively. So in conclusion, I would be remiss if I did not take the opportunity to extol the unsung heroes of libraries. But before I do that, I should go to my last slide. Oh, I'll apologize. Okay, I have a duplicate slide here. We do have other projects underway as we speak. We just broke ground on the Mission Branch Renovation Library, the Mission District, of course. That should be about an 18 to 24-month duration of construction. Chinatown Branch is in design. We hope to begin construction on that in 2024. The Ocean View Branch is being considered for a site currently. The San Francisco Public Library Strategic Planning Initiative is due early in 2024. Why that is significant is that it probably will be a catalyst for Blip 2.0. As I mentioned a second ago, 20 years have elapsed, more than 20, since the passage of Blip program initially. And it's time for the library to begin to reflect what we now have begun to appreciate more of in regard to how libraries are perceived and how they are actually used. And so there is conversation, and it will need to be abundantly endorsed by key people to have a reiteration of Blip and bring in the library to the little later in the 21st century than Blip 2000. So let me go back to mine. I really like this graphic because it depicts all the possibilities of a public library. All of these elements made possible for not only a transformative experience for individuals, but one that connects and builds relationships. To that point, for those of you who read the New York Times, William Crystal wrote an opinion piece last week about the crisis of loneliness in our country. The library is a very real and available bridge to interaction and overcoming isolation. An unfortunate consequence of the COVID obliged digital immersion that created alienation and loss of empathy. We must connect in safe and supportive spaces. I truly believe the library is part of the solution to addressing this crisis. So now, in conclusion, I'll get that slide up. I would be remiss, and someone spoke to a little bit earlier, if I did not take the opportunity to extol the unsung heroes of libraries, the librarians. In all my years among librarians, I've never ceased to be impressed by their passion and commitment to the work, and most importantly, to the public that they serve. I want to finish with a quote, I guess, from Kurt Vonnegut. In his 2005 book, A Man Without a Country, he said, "And on the subject of burning books, I want to congratulate librarians, not famous for their physical strength or their powerful political connections, or their great wealth, who, all over the country, have staunchly resisted anti-democratic bullies who have tried to remove certain books from their shelves and have refused to reveal to thought police the names of persons who have checked out those titles. So the America I love still exists, if not in the White House, or the Supreme Court, or the Senate, or the House of Representatives, or the media. The America I love still exists at the front desks of our public libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And now we're going to bring everyone together. We've had a view of East Bay, South Bay, San Francisco, and now we're going to bring our guests together to have a conversation with John King.
Rickety chairs. I want to thank, first of all, again, thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank panelists for very good presentations. And as Leonard was saying, you did kind of take a tour of the region. And Charles, I apologize for not introducing you as well at the beginning. I was being too brisk. So what I want to do is just toss one quick question to each of the panelists, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion wider, and then shift to questions from the audience, because this is such an important and very interesting topic. So I want to start with Adam. And I'm going to, since I'm the architecture critic, this is going to be my one indulgent architecture question. With the building, you made a really good point of how the rammed earth kind of matches the materiality of the space, how it kind of defers to the oak trees and all. But still, you have a very historic Spanish Revival, classic California, town hall building, the historic one. And the main civic, the new building, the town hall, which we didn't see, is in a very deferential style to that. The library is totally different in terms of pure sections and plans and all. Did it take a bit of persuading to tell people that, no, this is going to feel like it fits once it's done?
Yes, it did. It took a lot of persuading to and just let our clients know that what we were doing was going to be responsive and authentic. The existing town hall that we designed, or the new civic center space, the new town hall, did have to abide by some very strict architectural rules. It had to express a certain thing, and the town of Atherton loves it, and it fits right into the neighborhood of large homes there. When it got to the library, we had a little bit more leeway, and we were working with a fantastic librarian who, right from the beginning, said, this is a space not about, iconic elements. This is not a space about books. This is a space about people. And started that conversation, and it was just an opening for us to step into. We also were asked by our client that this library be very sustainable and an example of how you can build in this part of California. What can this do as a demonstration? How can it teach in its own making, in its own design? And so when you have a fantastic client like that who's pushing you harder and harder, it was just inspiring to work with that group.
Great, thanks. And then the next question's for Tina. And this kind of comes in, you work on interiors and all. What is the challenge everyone stressed the need to talk with the public, engage with the whole civic discussion, really reach out. At the same time, the difficulty in process like that is that inevitably everyone has their priority for what a building should be, and certainly the library. And you've got, I'm sure, at every meeting, the person who's like, the important thing is to bring the books in front. This is a library, you should be immersed in books. And then the person who says, we need business training centers. And then the person who says, we need the whole children's area, should be, the library should just be for children. Does it get difficult to balance those desires, all of which are good, when it comes to actually figuring out a program for X amount of square feet that needs to function in multiple security versus comfort versus access information versus all the other ways?
Well, you answered your own question. Of course it is. There's only so much space, and I think probably just like people at the Mechanics Library know that there's more and more desire for places where people can stay and spend time and not just come and get something and take it home. And so it is a tension between that. And there's also a sense of nostalgia, I think, as people have mentioned about what library means. We all were able to go as children probably in this room, and you felt rich. You had that library card and you could take home anything you wanted. And it has a wonderful feeling that people don't want to lose. They don't want to lose that feeling that those books are there and those materials and that access is free. But I think it's more than that now. And I really respect the librarians who have transformed their profession, because there was a moment where libraries were talking just like Blockbuster about, are we needed anymore? Because people can order stuff online, they can get whatever they want digitally, and they transformed their careers to be about literacy in a different way. So it's not just about book literacy, it's about teaching people financial literacy, about digital literacy, it's about how to find better healthcare. And so they've broadened their mission about how to empower people to improve their lives.
Thank you. And Charles, a question for you. It's interesting, you're a librarian, then you were on the library commission, you kind of wrapped up being acting overall public works director, but really focusing on finishing up the library programs and the branch libraries and all. What are just one or two things you've learned about how these buildings need to function? Because the demands on them are so different now from they were then. Has flexibility become the key to you? Like, just give us a big box and we can redo it every 20 years. But I mean, just what are one or two kind of core truths you've learned about the physical library in this time?
Well, the opening of the main library in 1996 was a real inflection point, because it was one of the first central libraries that was veering away from some of the old paradigms about library design and entering into, frankly, the computer age. And it was resisted and it was vilified at the time. It was a very, very contentious experience for me as a first or second year commissioner, to have literally the pitchforks and the torches come out to every commission meeting from people who just could not ease away from their familiarity, their affection, their sentimentality for the old school library. So I would say that thankfully we're past that perceived too great a shift from a tried and true paradigm to where we are now, where I think there's a good deal more embrace and acceptance of varied experience of spaces and activities within a public library, unlike, as I said, what had been the case. So definitely we're seeing the importance of beginning to push that envelope a little bit more. In fact, one of the big challenges will be not having as many books on the shelves as historically we've seen, because of the way in which people wish to use the library, what they feel is important to have within the context of the library. Not that books will always be present, I think, but I do believe that libraries are going to begin to move into different areas of service and programming that will better speak, better align with the public expectation for, as we all, I think, alluded to the library as community room, as living room for the neighborhood where people seek out interactions. It isn't about just staring at a book or reading a magazine, but rather about engaging with fellow residents and others in the neighborhood.
With free Wi-Fi.
With
That's
absolutely
the
free
main
Wi-Fi.
thing, designing the cables.
Yes.
And Pauline, you talked a lot about the environmental aspect of the design. If we cast our eyes back, our minds back on the classic library, it is, you could say the Carnegie Library, and a crowd like this will probably get it. And there are the names of the authors emblazoned on the top of the classical facade and all. Clearly, the symbolic role that a library can play has gone beyond the architectural gesture and thing. So with something like the materiality, the energy use, the openness of the Atherton Library, what does that say about how just the notion of library as civic symbol is evolving?
Well, I think if you think about what civic means or what democratic means, it means for everybody. So this is now trying to create a place that does good for not just its little place, but its region and its broader place, right? We're thinking now, all of us, about living and making decisions that have a positive effect, not just for what we're doing, but for those who are doing the making and those who are a part of, even those we can't see. So when we think about materials, it's not just what would work for that sound wall, but is it made, in this case, the round earth is made of dirt, and that some local dirt. That means it has less cement. That means it's better from a carbon standpoint. Reducing carbon is good, not just for Atherton, but for everyone. So I think it is about broadening our understanding that civic is about the larger impact. Does that make sense?
And then last thing for Christopher, and you flashed the slide that showed all those libraries you worked on. So I'm kind of curious, during the last, we'll say 30 years or whatever, this is a variation of the question I asked Charles, but what's a little bit you've learned? I mean, library design is like anything. There are trends that come and go. And there are the libraries of a certain era that have features that maybe now, you don't have the business center community or whatever. But I'm just kind of curious, are there kind of basic core things you've learned to design for? Do you feel that works better than here's the cool library look this year that gets all the American Institute of Architects / library awards, and 5 years from now, that stuff's all getting torn out?
I think what I've learned is that every project is something completely new to me, and I learn something new every time. As I said, there's a long list there. I've been doing it for over 30 years, and so much has changed. First library didn't even have computers and had a card catalog. Things have changed, things like technology. But I think the thing that really sort of strikes me now is the types of spaces. We still have the things that we think of. We have some collections, but they're reduced. We have spaces for children. They're a lot more fun now than they used to be. There are places for teens that are a lot more and people are committing more to these spaces. And then noisy libraries and sort of learning to live with noise. But really what's really fun and interesting these days is the culinary kitchens that we're putting in libraries. Which are they're not just kitchens and teaching kitchens, but they're also places to learn culinary literacy. How do you eat about it? There are Spaces to maker spaces is one thing, but there are all kinds of flexible spaces that we're putting in that can do everything. So we gotta have this very flexible room that's got durable finishes and good ventilation, good lighting, but it can be turned into anything, and flexibility is kind of the key. And another sort of trend, recently are partnerships, where libraries are creating, bringing in other partners. So like in Missoula, they had a partnership with a university science museum, and they have that science museum teaching places for kids to learn science in the library. They have a place where social services, county social services comes in and has a place to give, sort of therapy and other kind of social services. Sacramento's got veterans organizations that are sort of providing services. Or Hayward has, all these different pop-up social services or community services. You can come in, lawyers in the library, or learning how to do your taxes. All these different things, and they have spaces created specifically to sort of provide this. So, the limitations are only sort of in our minds, because the librarians are so creative and they're so dedicated to kind of finding new relevant things. So every project starts with this community process where you're trying to discern what are the most important things. We don't ask questions about what do you want in your library. We kind of ask the questions about what do you want in your life, or what do you need in your life to make to achieve your goals or your ambitions. And then we try to synthesize that and figure out, well, how does that relate to the library in terms of spaces and functions and programs that we can bring into it. I have the wonderful opportunity to be remodeling the first library I ever did right now. Redwood City.
That's fun.
And we did it in the 1980s, and it is, we're sort of completely turning it, moving from the left to the right, from upstairs to downstairs, so the front to the back, and inside to outside, and it's been completely rethought. And it's really fun to go back and sort of my old haunts and redo it.
And very quick answer, because that's so interesting, but was that lessons learned over time, or is more the technology has changed and the civic expectations of the building have changed?
It's the civic expectations.
And then I want to ask one question of everyone and then give a few minutes for questions. So let's, just don't want to get into too involved in discussion or anything, because I do want to get to the questions from the audience. But for all of you, just in a kind of general sense, you don't all have to answer, but anyone with a thought on this. And we've touched on it throughout this, but what's the difference between doing a civic building, city hall, whatever, community center, and doing a library? Are there different expectations that people are bringing into the room when you're working on this public building as opposed to other types of public buildings?
Okay, I guess I'm short straw. I would say that, I'm not sure if they come bringing this, but there is a desire for this place to be a safe space. We talked a little bit about that. That it's a place where if someone is struggling with their identity, or having an issue with being unhoused, or having an issue with their peers, they come to the library. They come to the teen center. They come to just be there. And I think we're hearing more and more of that. And so it doesn't become part of the programming, but it's what those who work in libraries tell us that they face and they try to embrace. So how do we think about that?
Thanks.
I take just a different tact on the way I heard the question, and I think from an architectural standpoint, thinking about what does it look like to approach a library, I think we all have that image of a Carnegie in our head, and we can't recreate that. We can't put the steps up to the front door, which meant accessibility issues, but there still were some core things. Generally, there was some symmetry. There was this grand room where you felt different than living in your living room or the desk in your office to read. And we hear from college students still, even they're moving into a new campus, they want that grandeur, so you want it taller, you want really great natural light to create this sense that you're doing something important in learning. And I think it's a little bit intrinsic, and I think it has to do with the quality of materials. You want things that are a little bit more permanent, more lasting than you would have in a house, or maybe than you're expecting to find at the rec center, to elevate that sense. And maybe it isn't the Corinthian columns, that used to imply education, but there is something to an orderliness and a grandeur that elevates the experience.
Yeah, I would say that all civic buildings need to reflect the identity, the aspirations, the community they serve. So I think that irrespective of what kind of civic building it is, it must carry that import. The simple truth is that libraries do more for more than any other civic building. That there's no discrimination in the library user community. If you're going to a community center, you're inclined to be fit or otherwise involved in sport or athletics, and of a certain nature. So that type of building already is building. The only other sort of venue I can think of that is accepting of anyone under any circumstances is the park, because you go to enjoy it for what it provides or offers to you. But libraries have a sort of a tougher job to do, which is to understand the diversity of their community, respond to it in as responsive, responsible a way as they can. And that's a lot to do.
Thanks.
I would say kind of, when I think back to the Atherton project and having to deal with both of these buildings at the same time, and maybe more on a poetic level, the library for us and for that community was really a place of ideas, and the architecture was there to support that and connect you to the place. The Civic Center, it had a police station, it had the mayor's, it was a much more static kind of formal experience. And it was wonderful to kind of design a civic center with that type of bracketing of architectural language. When you go to the Atherton Library, when you leave it, you don't walk away with this idea of a building. You walk away with this experience of daylight and the materials and the experience of engaging with the community. When you walk away from the Civic Center, the architecture kind of leaves with you.
Those are great answers, and the only thing I add to that would be that every library needs to feel very welcoming, that every person who comes into that building feels themselves belonging in that space. And then when they're in that space, they have an elevated sense of sort of grandeur so much, it's just kind of something greater than just some ordinary space. And we try to achieve.
Great, thanks. These are great answers. It's been a great presentation, but I do want to give a few moments for questions rather than reminisce about my life in libraries. Yes. Me first, and then.
Stand up and ask your question.
Yeah.
And you can question.
I can project very well. Hi there, my name is Levi. I used to be an architect, so I'm a recovering architect. But I didn't have a strong association with the library as a child. Definitely, I was fortunate enough to go to Cornell, went to a lot of libraries, and both classical and modern. And I think that a lot of people who are in university have a really strong association with the library. And then when they leave university, lose it very quickly, especially when you go into a corporate job and live in a city like San Francisco. When I was thinking about like the brain drain, if you will, that San Francisco has had of people leaving the city and kind of exiting San Francisco, these well-educated coastal elites, right? What is the role of the library in mitigating this brain drain? How can the library be a place for these, like, I guess, how can the library play a role in creating like a civic sense of pride? Not just for, I definitely recognize the role that they play for people in all classes. And I think that I'm just curious about your thoughts on the role of how libraries play a role for maybe people who have also been in higher education, who have such a strong association with them, and why people who went through those experiences so often lose maybe their association with libraries.
Any answers?
I'll try one thing, which would be to make libraries from being kind of this old-fashioned institution where you don't really feel drawn to go in into something that looks so exciting that you want to get in there and take a look at it. What's going on in there? Is that a library? What is that? It doesn't look like anything I've seen before. And once you get in, then we hook you with something really fun. It's the books, the books, that are really fun, or there's media, or there's some, program going on nearby, and it's all transparent. We're seeing a lot of activity and fun stuff going on. People go, wow, this is my community. This is stuff going on here. This is kind of happening. Maybe that's practical.
I mean, one quick thing I would say is that's kind of a challenge of the libraries, but it's a challenge of anything, is Christopher was saying, libraries need to be welcoming. But at the same time, one thing I know just in my own life is there are the cycles where I wasn't going to libraries.
Right.
Because it was a point in my life where I wasn't going to libraries. I mean, as a reporter, you go to do research. But then I had a kid and suddenly you're back into the cycle of libraries. And then there's this bizarre thing, in my 30s or whatever, it's like, my gosh, I can check any book out here and it's free. I don't need to go find this as a used book or order it online. It's like, this is great. And it's like this weird thing, like I'm just going back to when I was a kid at the Pleasant Library. So I mean, it is tough because you can put all these great things in it, but there's a certain limit to what you can do in the reaching out. But it's a good provocative question. And the woman on the same row.
Sure, thank you. I rue the lack of a cozy space. When I look at these things, and I've been a library haunter since childhood, and when we go to small towns, we always go to the library, because that's and somebody referred to talk about it, it's reflecting the community. And you're educating me about the whole town square part of this thing. But now all I'm seeing is too much transparency. I'd like to hide out. We go to the Mill Valley Library. No, I mean, seriously. The Golden Gate Library, but the things, I mean, I'm a real fan of mechanics, but I go to the other libraries too. Anyway, the Golden Gate, when the children are there, you can't work. Literally, you cannot hear yourself think. And so it's groovy, it's a nice community square, I'm glad there are people there, but it's troublesome in the, what about the people who still want to go off? And you're carting them off into this quiet space, but it's still an incubator, I mean, it's still brought, open walls and so forth, so we're throwing out the data.
Well, the question is, what about having some quiet space and some nooks and things? I will say, as the librarian who had, who had the fun chore of doing the piece, I wrote about a few libraries earlier this year. The Atherton chairs are super comfortable.
They're very cozy.
They're very comfortable chairs. And their quiet room pulled off the quietness. But I do know what you're talking about, that there was the whole you can't talk above a whisper in libraries, and then it became the kind of the encouraging. I want to get to other questions, but I got the impression with Berkeley, with the teen area, that it was kind of like, how do you rethink and expand teen center areas? That the city of Berkeley just redid its downtown library, not a full redo, but the kind of periodicals thing, which was a huge chunk of a floor, shrank down, and you've got more of a teen center. And it seems like kind of almost a little bit of pull them away out of the main flow of the quieter areas.
Well, that's true, but I think that you have a really good point, and I think that is part of our job in listening to the community, because we can talk to each other and hear these same answers too much, and forget that people do want a diversity of experiences. And for example, we heard in talking to some of the students at Laney College, we thought, well, we want to give them the same experience that Stanford students have, that they all need to learn to collaborate so they can work in these businesses. And they said, no, our houses are so noisy, we live in such cramped conditions, we need to come someplace silent. And so we need to take that into account and design around that as well.
And as Linda pointed out, the mechanics library has lots of nooks and crannies and comfortable chairs.
Am I one routine?
Well, maybe just to that point, the Atherton Library is very interesting. There are 4 quiet rooms that you can rent out. And the librarian is very clear, they're always rented out. So the need for these types of spaces that you can just find that peace and quiet and focus, still there. Libraries need that acknowledge that.
Okay, question first, and then
Yeah, hi.
stand up and project, and I'll.
Thank you so much for this really deeply fascinating, important conversation. I'm still formulating my question slightly, but it's something along the lines of, you're making such a good presentation on all the opportunities that libraries present and how you're trying to reflect society and the different environments, what the needs are. And I'm just finishing Eric Kleinberg's How Is This for People? I don't know if any of you read that. So fantastic. And my question is, something I think that's really lacking now is civic participation. And I'm wondering, how do you see this beautiful moving of increase of opportunities at libraries impacting social infrastructure and people wanting to participate more in their civic environments? How do you see the libraries being funded?
It's a great book. I recommend everybody to read it. It's an easy read, it goes quickly, and it makes some really great points. Libraries are kind of a neutral territory where people can come together without having to be part of anything. And librarians and other people in the community, can put on programs and have forums where people can come together, whether organized or they can be by chance. And so by having these kind of sort of welcome shared spaces, people can come together, they can have chance meetings, they can develop relationships, and I find very puts that so well is that those things start in the library, but then they go out into the community, so that then there's this network in the community where people care for each other more. But it's also a place where, political and, conversations can happen in sort of a more neutral territory. And you can sort of get out of your echo chamber and maybe actually have a conversation with somebody who doesn't totally agree with you all the time.
Anyone else? Then we'll roll over to the woman sitting next to her. And thank you for that question.
Hi, I'm Kathy Bella, and thank you again for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. It's been great. Mechanics Institute, our neighborhood has dramatically changed since COVID. Our corporations, many of them have either moved out of the area or the majority of the workers are working from home. So looking at commercial has changed dramatically. So look across the streets is like, and corresponding businesses have changed as a result of the fact that workers are in the same way they are. And I think we'd like to see ourselves as being a really critical part of helping to refurbish the neighborhood. I'm curious about whether you've worked on library projects where the library's role was exactly that. It wasn't necessarily anymore in what used to be a really thriving neighborhood with a lot of foot traffic and a lot of use in the library during working hours, but instead it's different. Any thoughts about that? Any work with libraries having been a pivotal part in helping to turn around the neighborhood? And correspondingly to turn around their own work in the library?
Charles, did you see that with some of the San Francisco branches?
Our branches, maybe a couple of exceptions, absolutely brand new branches hadn't existed before, were very nicely situated in the neighborhoods in which they occurred. And so I think generally, the vibrancy of those places, we're already benefiting from the presence of that library there. Something came to mind as you were speaking, Kathy, which is when I spent time in Chicago, got to know that library system pretty well. they were going through a very large expansion of their library branch network. And where they built branches that hadn't existed before, they found that in many of these neighborhoods, it was a centering and a calming influence, because the very purpose of the library was to serve, and to serve, again, the diversity of the neighborhood in all of its expressed needs and wants. And so when you have a presence, a civic presence in community, in a neighborhood like that, it just creates a ripple effect. And I know in Chicago, they were, I won't say surprised, but they were very pleased to see how these new libraries, where there hadn't been one before, was having a very centering and calming effect. So libraries can be that place that lift up. So.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
Maybe one or two last questions real quick.
We got in the back.
You here. Oh, wait, there's someone back? Okay, in the back and then you.
Thank you. So first, thank you very much for the branch library system. We love it. We live in very close to McLaren Park, and so we have Portola and Excelsior and Glen Park and Ingleside that we can hit. And these guys do all the time, and they hit the main library as well. And we're really glad that they're refurbishing them. But as far as, so the Mission Library on 24th Street, it's been refurbishing for a year or more now. And these guys just hop on a bus and go to whatever library. But, and this might be more of a logistical question than an architectural one, but is there a way to, so at the Mission Library, they put a van out in front so people can get books a couple times a week, but the library's been shut down for more than a year. Is there a way to work through the logistics of that so that people have access to a library in the meantime?
The question is the eternal dilemma of putting in new improved structures. What do you do while the construction workers are inside?
Yeah.
Charles, you get that question. Although maybe you guys, you've learned that elsewhere, great too.
Yeah, what the San Francisco Public Library has 4 bookmobiles, and so when they shut down a branch for work, whether it's a short or long-term project, they generally roll out the bookmobiles to serve that community for precise, durations and or moments throughout the week. I'm not aware that the Mission branch has been closed that long. Take your word for it. The nice thing about San Francisco being 7 by 7 is that you're not very far from another branch library. We have more than 24 libraries throughout the city. We also have interlibrary loans, so if you need to get a book that's not available in your branch, you can get it through another branch. So we're blessed to have that network where you're literally within walking distance of 1 or 2 other branches other than your own neighborhood branch.
Okay, and then up here, there was a question.
Yeah, so my first question is, should the libraries be called libraries from this point on? Since they are becoming social spaces, cafes, bookstores, art centers, maker spaces. Seems like it conflicts with the main Library of Congress, right? But it's my first question. And my second one, other question, but more of a, do you do any type of usage and usability study on your design libraries?
Okay, 2.
Yeah, like at Richmond Library, I specifically went there for this talk, and I ran into some gas issues. Not because of your design, but because of what was mandated for you to design.
Okay, 2 questions. One is, are there post-occupancy studies on usage? We got a hint of that in the blip report. And then should they be called libraries if the idea is to make all these other things happen?
Yeah, you can call it anything you want, I guess, because, there's libraries in East London are called the Idea Store. Hayward is called the Community Learning Center, but we rebranded it early in the design process to say, well, it's a library, but we want to call it a Community Learning Center because that's what's important for So, and you know, there are lots of systems around the country and in the world that have kind of, I know Doc 2, Doc 1 in Aarhus, you know, they renamed that there. So, you know, I think it is what we want it to be. And the integration of community functions with the library is something that's happening. Menlo Park is building a new sort of library community center in the east, in the sort of the Bell Haven portion of it, which is the, you know, more disadvantaged part of Menlo Park. And we worked on that early with the community, and then we worked with the city to kind of see it happen. And it's a fully integrated. And you walk in the front door, there's a children's area in front of you, there's a senior center on the right, there's a gymnasium on the left. Go upstairs, there's a computer room, there's a teen space, and then there's an adult place. No, you can carry books back and forth anywhere you want to. So.
But how about the question? I mean, Atherton hasn't been open that long, but were there studies afterwards, like are we bringing more patrons as a result, or more books circulating as a result, things like that?
I'll respond to Atherton. So yes, we do some post-occupancy. It hasn't been open that long. So we are understanding where there are glitches or where there are snags. And so that'll hopefully, it's sad to hear that you didn't get what you needed to get to, but I think that is part of this evolution for any project actually to do better. I would say I would, you know, I actually love that the library has this expanding definition for many reasons, because it means that it's alive, it's not static, it's responsive to each community, and so why not be that flexible?
Yes.
I will say too, the interesting thing is in the teen centers we're doing, the teens are, and the teen center does a lot of things. It's like hip hop, videography, whatever they want. They're loud, they're very loud, and it's only for teens because we weren't allowed to get in until they brought us in. But the thing that the teens say is that they tell their parents they're going to the library. Their parents go, awesome, as long as you want. So there's something really nice about what comes with the naming of what, you know, the history of library.
I would say that I think that it still does center back to this idea of literacy. I think that there is this passion, whether it's small children, getting them ready to learn to read, and from the very early stages of training their eyes to go from left to right, to the new immigrants who are coming, who are, whether they're learning a new language or never learned to read in their own language, or learning to read and be able to educate themselves, that still center what a library is and makes it different. And part of the struggle that, you know, I think we heard a librarian from Yale say, you have to realize that people are walking around with a powerful computer in their pocket all day long. I mean, when I started my career, we had shelves to put telephone books, and you just don't need some of that material anymore. But you do need to learn to read and educate, and we know that's more important than ever.
Thanks. For those of you familiar with the name, there's a sculpture out on the market. It's an L, two L's that looks like a shape, and it's kinetic, it moves with the wind. That was donated by Carl Gerasi. Some of you may know Carl. He was the inventor of the pill. And he donated it to the library. He had a very awesome collection of sculpture, but he said it moved him because it represented the library literature, learning, literacy. It can be learning of all kinds. It isn't just strictly your grandfather's interpretation or definition of learning. And so whenever you walk by that sculpture, think of the L's and what they signify for the meaning of the library.
Okay, thank you. And so we're way over, and we didn't even get to talk about the demise of reference sections. So if you can give a hand to everybody.
I want to thank our panelists for this inspiring and important conversation. I have to go to the center of the room, excuse me. For this important and inspiring conversation. And also, I just want to say the Mechanics Institute Library and Chess Room and programs and author events and film, we are dedicated to you and dedicated in our mission to be a place of lifelong learning and education and enrichment and engagement. But it requires you to be part of it. And so I hope for those of you who are new to Mechanics Institute, join us. Come take a tour on Wednesday. We have a free tour Wednesday at noon of our whole institute with the librarians. Also, Alyssa Stone will give a short preview of the library for those of you who would like to join a very short tour, but the full regalia will be on Wednesday at noon, and please join us. Remember that this is a place for civil discourse, which we need so much in this country today. And I thank you for being with us tonight for that purpose.